All right, everybody, welcome back to the Charting Life podcast, where we try to explore life's uncharted territories through meaningful conversations and always with a healthy dose of laughter. Before we get into the episode, I just want to ask that you interact with us, and that way kind of enhances the experiences, kind of builds a community, and helps with the algorithm. If something catches your attention, or if you have a thought or story you want to share, go ahead and put it in the comments, interact with us on Facebook, and definitely do the like and subscribe. And the one other thing I'm trying to ask is at some point in this conversation, it's very likely that something is going to remind you of somebody you know. Maybe it's a friend, family, somebody you don't like. Maybe you're bullying in high school. I don't know, whatever, just somebody you know. Go ahead and share that with them individually. And that way, I think it'll really be able to help and also show that you care, even if it was your bully. So, anyways, without going too far down the weird trail, today we have, again, Dustin Wright with Raising the Wild Ones podcast. Did you guys change your name yet, or is it still the
It's
same thing?
still
What's
it's
going on
still
there?
raising the wild ones. We're
Okay.
I don't know. That's a story in itself for another day. But as of right now, we're still raising the wild ones podcast.
All right. Over here trying to make sure I don't drop my phone. Anyways, so last we talked, there was you were talking about you had camps going on. You're gonna try a couple different types of camps out in the middle of Texas, right?
Yep,
Yep.
out in the middle of
So
Central Texas, and
Central
so
Texas, nice and hot, right?
you know what? I'm not gonna knock on wood, man. It has been a mild Texas summer, which
Really?
it was 84 today in the
Wow.
middle of Central Texas. It should be 106, but it's not. But I know it's coming because it's Texas.
Yeah.
It'll hit at some point. I know it.
Yeah.
I know it.
So were the did the camps go well?
Camps went well so far. Well, I say so far. We have wrapped up with our final one. Was not last week, but the week before that,
Nice.
and it was a wild and crazy June. I mean, I had we calculated the time. We had like 3 days off of nothing going on in the month
Hmm.
of June. But I mean, it was great. It's wonderful. My favorite, I know I talked about this one earlier, was we did our preteen camp at the beginning, and I
Hmm.
just love, kind of that camp because I mean, it's for younger kids that, a lot
Hmm.
of times they may have not experienced corporate worship, and man, it's just wonderful. I mean, especially because like, growing up Baptist, we still have children's church, and like third
Hmm.
graders still go to children's church, and so it's like they
Yeah.
still pull third graders out, and we have third graders come into our camp. And
All right.
so it was fun. It was great. Our numbers were a little bit higher than we thought they were, which is always fun when you're trying to make sure everybody has a bed to sleep. But
Yeah. Hey, there's
that's
always
all
tents,
just
right?
little stuff. Oh yeah, there's always tents. That's
You
why they
know,
say going to camp, right?
yeah. Yeah. That actually it reminds me of a story a couple years ago. So I'm in Kentucky and our summers aren't quite yours, but we definitely get a lot of rain, it gets really humid. And no matter what, whenever it seems like whenever um my denomination, whenever we do our state camps, there's always one or two of the weeks that's gonna be just rained out of which is nuts. But anyways, it was a high school camp, and I was so excited to hear the story with this. But so usually they will leave Friday morning. So Thursday night's kind of the last big night, last night, preaching corporate worship, and then with lots of fun, events going on
Yeah.
there. Well, crazy storm came through Wednesday like afternoon and tore out the power to the whole place. Like it was bad. I don't think it was a tornado, but it was close to it. One of those situations, and so they had some generators running, get things running just bare bones, and they were starting to call parents, hey, you need to come pick your kids up Wednesday night instead of Friday morning. And what they had decided, they actually asked the high schoolers, like, hey, look, um, I know we're gonna have, typically we're supposed to have our church service here in about an hour, but we understand if you don't maybe not want to do that because of the situation. And they're like, let's just do this. So they got like a little amp with a microphone generator type thing and an acoustic guitar, and just gathered around and they all sang, worship songs and prayed and that sort of thing.
Oh
I'm like,
yeah.
that is so amazing, and I absolutely love that. Um, I don't know if you have any, camp stories. It may not be, obviously it's not gonna be the exact same, but do you have any, particular favorite stories from this last year?
Well, from this last year, so you talked about like storms. I mean, so especially with preteen camp, it's the first week of June. That's
Mhm.
still in the height of Central Texas
Right.
severe weather season. I mean,
Okay.
storms build to the west, they push to the east. I mean, it happens like two or three times a week. We had one night where we had a real bad storm it was just like north of I-20. I don't know, like, kind of north of Abilene, if you know where Texas is, I-20, and
Okay.
kind of up towards Oklahoma. And they were bad. I mean, there were like two or three tornadoes in these storms, and they were probably about 40 or 50 miles north of us, but we could see them. And so, I mean, it's flat, it's Texas, and you talk about just like seeing little kids like just come up and be like, can we pray for those people that are dealing with that right now?
Oh yeah.
And it's like, yeah, yeah, we can. And it's just kind of like, because as the camp director, I was sitting there looking at the weather, like I was sitting on my four-wheeler just watching it because I'm like, this stuff's
Mhm.
coming towards us, which it did build that night and kind of come through. It wasn't terrible for us at all,
Mhm.
but it was like just seeing the little kid when, even me, where my worry is, what do I need to do? What's my next step? And the little kid's faith is, let's just pray for it. And I was like, man, that's just like it humbles me as the guy who's
Right.
just worried about the weather, going, you know what? Have I stopped? Did Dustin stop to pray about that? No, he didn't.
Yeah.
I need to stop and pray about it.
Yeah, I've been catching myself too recently, like, okay, getting all in the mode of whatever I'm doing, and maybe even starting to get stressed out a bit, and think, did I really have I not prayed for this situation yet? So yeah, that's awesome. And especially that you have a younger kid who's just giving you those reminders, and God's really good at giving
Yep.
those reminders. But
And
that
then
actually gives
I
a
do
go ahead.
I was gonna say I do have one more funny one if you want a
Sure, go for it.
comical story. So we take up offerings for like missions and stuff at our camps, and my
Mhm.
favorite one is we tell them during the offering like, hey, if you give the money that you would normally buy at the concession stand, a Coke and a candy bar, if you take that money and you give it to us, we can send a kid to camp. And so we partner with this camp that does camps in Cuba, and so it's like if the money for a Coke and a candy bar, that sends one kid to camp for a week. And so I had a little girl walk up to me with a Coke and a candy bar. And she was like, I don't know how this is going to send a kid to camp, but I want to send a kid to camp. And she hands me a Coke and a candy bar. And I'm like, oh, little girl, I'll send a kid to camp for you,
Yep.
but I'm definitely going to eat this candy bar and drink this Coke. So
That's
there you go.
awesome.
That may have just totally derailed your segue there, but
No, no. That see, always with a healthy dose of laughter. So there we go. Kid, honestly, kids are great, and their logic is
kids,
is
man.
fantastic. But with the whole thing about worrying and praying and that sort of thing, that does lead a segue into what we're going to talk about today. One of the things I realized in our last episode was both of us, we like theology, we love biblical studies, but we also have different ways that we approach scripture and how we do it. And because I'm going to be a geek out a little bit, I think I've talked about it in one of the other episodes. Basically, there's this lovely, cool term called exegesis, which is not calling Jesus your ex. Basically, it is basically it means to pull out from.
Oh, I'm holding it together. Don't worry. We're good. I wasn't expecting that one. That's a good one right there.
I didn't
I'm
expect
writing
that
that
either.
down for one of my dad jokes.
Yes, go for it.
Oh, that's a good one.
If I can
Sorry if I
compose myself.
derailed you
No,
again, man.
that's great. Uh,
Ooh.
so exegesis basically means to pull out from is essentially what that means. And I think about it as far as like if anyone loves Minecraft, you're digging down to pulling out the diamonds or whatever. But in reality, it's almost like digging for treasure, and you're searching the ground for what's there, and you're pulling out from it. And so that's what we're doing from Scripture. Basically, you could either read your own views into the Bible, but that's kind of boring, or you can pull out the awesome treasure that's in there. And so we're going to do that. I know last time we tackled some of the weirder verses, and maybe some things that are overlooked. But today we're going to cover a couple different passages that are a little more obvious things that people hear a lot more, but I think there's some hidden things in there. So the first one's going to be in the New Testament. I'm going to go ahead and read it. It's in Philippians chapter 4. Let's see here. Verse 6 is, do not be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. Seems pretty simple, pretty straightforward. And one of the things that really got me really thinking about this was just the very first word, be. Just be, just be anxious for nothing. And there's two thoughts that that I started thinking of. One is, I guess, the question of, is this literally telling us to never feel anxiety at all? Just nip it as soon as you get it, or is that term be more like a state of being verb? So is it the idea that don't stay anxious or never feel anxious? And so, if it's never be anxious at all, that's setting a pretty high standard. I don't know if I can hit,
Oh,
right?
yeah. Oh,
Um,
yeah.
yeah. So let me, I guess, mention one or two things real quick, and I'm gonna let Dustin here jump in on this. The first thing I would say is context. So the next couple verses is very popular. So right after it tells us to not be anxious about anything, but to come to God with prayer and thanksgiving about it, it says, "Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things." And so that's just the immediate context. But historically, too, it was really interesting. Philippi was a city that was technically outside the Roman area, but it's I heard it said this way, it's almost like an embassy because it was a city dedicated to Rome. And both you had both, it was kind of like a retired military outpost type place, but it was also a very wealthy city that all had all the advantages of Rome. But Christianity was not really well accepted there. So in Acts, I think it's chapter 16, when Paul and Silas found themselves in prison for casting out a demon out of a slave girl, that sort of thing, preaching the gospel, they found themselves um, found themselves in prison there. And there, God did some really cool stuff there. And then, just the long story short, is it was still a very dangerous time and place to be a Christian, even in the place of Philippi. And so, within all that context, Paul is still saying, "Hey, it's dangerous to be a Christian, but be anxious for nothing, but also go to God with prayer." And so that's a very
Yeah.
just very small snippet of a little bit of my kind of approach. But getting into the nitty gritty of the words and that sort of stuff, I will pass that on over to you, Dustin. What are maybe your initial thoughts, and then what are some cool things you've dug up?
What's really interesting about this is I mean I'm a Greek guy. I just love the Greek language. It's
Mhm,
and when we really kind of break it down, there wasn't a better language of the time for the New Testament to be written in
mhm,
as Greek because it is so expressive. And one of the things kind of to go along your side of like a state of being verb is really the see I keep trying to mix it up. So the way it is straight in the Greek is at the start of verse 6, it's nothing worry about is kind of how the breakdown happens.
right,
And
Hakuna
so,
Matata, right?
yeah, exactly. But when you really look at the word that means don't be anxious, it's a verb. And really,
Mhm,
the best translation for that is be anxious about is the best way. Some people say be worry about or don't worry about, but be anxious is the best translation. Well, in my opinion, there's
mhm.
probably some other guy out there who's gonna be like, nah, Dustin, you're wrong. But
And if that's the
you
case,
know,
leave it in the comments, and we'll debate you or not.
if
But
we can,
comment.
I, I'm good for a debate. But what's so wild for me to think about sometimes is it's two words. Like what we're really talking about here in the Greek language is just two words, and it's one word that's translated as nothing roughly, and this is just a rough translation. And the second word is translated worry about.
Mhm,
And so it's like, okay, so then what do you do with that from there? Then you take a look and you're right. You go take a look at it and it's say basically what it is you've got the word that means be anxious about is I'm probably going to butcher the Greek because I'm terrible at actually speaking Greek, but it's marinate, which is really interesting when you think
mhm.
about it because I did some digging to see if this is where we get our word marinate from.
Okay, yeah,
Because like I was thinking
that would be cool.
that that would be really cool. I didn't really find anything definitive, but then I got to thinking about it, and it's like when you marinate something, what are you doing? You're letting whatever you're trying to put into the meat just like soak into the meat.
Mhm,
And so it's like, well, if we don't need to be anxious about, it's like, okay, so is that what worrying does? Is we just let it soak into us? That's a little thing maybe we could take away at some point. But
yeah,
so it's marinate, and basically it comes down to be anxious about is a good one. That is a verb, and it is present imperative active. And basically what that means is that is a verb that's happening in present, and it's a verb that's going to continue to happen and
mhm,
continue to happen. So it's not in past tense like it's already happened. It's not like it's happening now, and it's not like it's going to happen. Basically, the tense of that is it's happening now, and it's going to continue to happen.
right.
It's
It's
really the
kind of
same verb.
continuously in the present.
Exactly. And it's the same verb that really is used for salvation, or the same type a
Mhm,
ton in the Bible where it's like our salvation continues through Jesus Christ. It's not just like we're saved, but God continually saves us just
right.
all the time, which is really a neat way to look at that as well. But
Yeah, I think I've heard that just as a brief little, moment where it says, we have been saved, we are being saved, and we will be saved. Is kind
and
of the
we're will
way,
being saved. I mean,
and
yeah.
what we will be is not yet revealed. It's like in heaven we're going to kind of see what things more full there.
Yeah.
But
And kind of the same thing could almost be applied to here is don't be anxious, we shouldn't be anxious, and we're not going to be anxious in the
Mhm,
future. Now, I think you're onto something here when you talk about exegeting this passage, because you're right. You got to take a look at not just this verse, but what are the verses around it saying? And really kind of even the Greek kind of breaks it down where it's like, no, we don't need to be anxious about nothing, because if we're anxious about nothing, I mean, there's a leak in my house and it rained earlier today. I was a
Mm,
little anxious that that leak was going to drip like just two
yeah.
hours ago, and so it's like, but when you take a look kind of verbatim from Greek to Greek, the nothing word is a noun. Is it a noun? That's an adjective. It's an
Yeah.
adjective, accusative, neuter, singular was that is. And so that word is meden. And basically the base translation of that word is nothing or no. That word is either
Okay.
used for like no or nothing. And so it's like we don't need to be anxious about anything. Okay, so then you break that down and you start to looking at it. That means once the anxiousness comes in, we can push that out. Don't stay anxious is kind of the way,
Hmm.
just the base translation of those two words is kind of what I get out of that when
Right.
I start really digging into it, is
Hmm.
not to be anxious
Right.
continually. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
it
Does that
does.
make sense?
Oh yeah,
You
absolutely. It
know?
makes sense to me. One of the things that I think maybe tied some more interesting details into that was in First Peter chapter 5. It says, let's see, verse 7 is humble yourself, starting with verse 6, humble yourselves therefore under the mighty hand of God, so that at the proper time he may exalt you, casting all your anxieties on him because he cares for you. And so I was looking that up, and it looks like the same, it's a version of the same word. So where this is a verb, the mar- marinade one, I'm just gonna call it marinate. With
Marinate.
yeah, so that was a verb, and then this one in Peter is a noun. And it looks like, and I have my notes here. And again, I'm not the Greek guy, but um, it looks like this one was like a state of being preoccupied or concerned about something, relates to like the mental state is with the Peter one. And basically what it looks like to me is when you have these anxieties, which are going to have them, and it's not, it's a sin that you have an anxiety, but when you have it, you cast it, you bring it up to God, which is exactly what Paul is saying here, to was it, take it in prayer with thanksgiving as well. And so I
Yeah.
have I've called it my soft conclusion, and I'll see what you have there. But basically, we have limited space. Oh, sorry, let me back up just a little bit. Um, the with I don't know what program you're using. I like to use Step Bible. It's completely free, so I'm not getting sponsored by it. But if they want to, I'll be more than happy to
Go
do
for
more of this. Please,
it.
please do. But they give you really good word analysis, and what I do like in there is you can, hit the kind of like the word. It gives you the details of it, but also how many times it's been used in the Bible. And then you can also
Oh
tell
yeah.
like which books it's been used to, because like Luke might use it in a certain way, and then Paul might use it in a certain way as well. But anyways, there's a couple of words with is solicitous and to expend careful thought. And so it's solicitous is basically just to solicit. You're showing interest or concern, and expend is basically an idea. It's a word using that you are um, using up a limited resource. And so bringing all of this together, and I think with what you're saying as well, is again, my soft conclusion is we have limited space for our cares and thoughts, and staying in the state of anxiety and worry is spoken against. Rather, we are told to bring these thoughts, cares, and concerns to God in prayer with thanksgiving, and then God's peace will guard our hearts. And then, even better than thinking and worrying on these, is the next verses in Philippians of the whatever is good, true, noble, etc. And so this gives you the I don't know if antidote's the right word, but this is the opposite of, if you're not just ignoring your anxiety, because someone would say just don't think bad thoughts ever, because that's just a bad mindset. And I don't think that's the best way to go about it. It's being honest with what you feel, coming to God with that, and saying, God, I'm feeling anxious about the water dripping or the weather or
Yeah.
whatever this horrible thing is going on. In Paul's situation of, hey, God, we're feeling anxious because we're going to be imprisoned, for whatever's going on. And you can be honest with it, bring it to God, and then allow that to turn, that sorrow to joy, and that mourning into dancing, that sort of thing. When we're also able, then, basically that's the work of God to, in the midst of all the chaos, still have joy and being able to think and fix our mind, um, put our mind in the present tense on good, true, lovely,
Yeah.
beautiful, that sort of thing. Does that sound about right to you? Or you have any input on that?
Oh no, I like that. And also another thing to kind of dovetail off that is when we think about these passages, and especially looking at them in the Greek language, we
Hmm.
have to remember how the Greek reader reads, and especially how the ancient Greek reader reads, because that helps us a ton. And here in the States, when we read, it's the first thing that we read out of the bat. It's like the most important thing in that
Hmm.
sentence. You know, it's like Dustin went to the store, right?
Hmm.
Dustin, he's the guy who went to the store.
Subject.
The store
Yeah.
is not really important. But in Greek, it's more or less what comes out at the end of the sentence is
Mm.
what's the subject and really the focus of that entire sentence. And especially in this verse, it says, in nothing. What? So I pulled out another one of my Greek New Testaments here because I like the way this one does it a little better. We could get into manuscripts, but that's probably a real boring conversation.
Maybe in another episode. We'll see.
But it's like in this one, it says, in nothing be anxious, but in everything by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, the requests of you let be made known to God. That was a very rough. Good Greek is bad English. That's how I
Yes.
got through all my Greek classes. But and it's like, so the whole point of this isn't necessarily the anxious part. An ancient Greek reader would read this verse, and the point they would get out of this is we need to be thankful and we need to focus on God and we need to make our petitions known to Him.
Mhm.
Not necessarily of the no, don't be anxious. It's more or less the Greek reader would have, we need to do this. We don't need to focus on the not do that, but focus
Mhm.
on the do this part. And
Yeah.
so that's another interesting kind of takeaway that I like about this verse is this verse is a very great example of the we focus on the not do kind of with
Mhm.
our modern ears and our modern
Mhm.
reading when the ancient Greek and the ancient Hebrew would have focused on the do instead of the
Mhm.
not do. And so it's kind of some give or take in there a little bit too, which is interesting. That was lovely. My Greek professor in college, he would always say that, and then he would always tell me, "Now, Dustin, your translations are bad English," and then he'd say, "But they're good Greek," and I'm like, "It's great class."
That's good. Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. This is kind of almost inspiring me to take some additional Greek classes in my seminary. Within the theology degree I'm taking, I can do one that adds Hebrew and Greek to it, and I could do one that doesn't have those. It's about the only difference is one that has does have Hebrew and Greek, or one that doesn't, and it's only about one semester difference. And I've been really nervous about trying to do the you know add the extra little bit so that I can do Hebrew and Greek. It'd be better off for me if I do it, but man, I can I've taken a bunch of Spanish, and I can order it off the menu, and I know where the bathroom is, and I think I know a couple of words I shouldn't be saying too. So, but
I'll say
anyway, yeah.
I love Greek, and I mean I really do, and really probably the main reason I love Greek is because I'm terrible at English. I'm world most grammar. See,
Yeah.
that sentence even sounded bad, and I said it in
Right.
English, and it's like, but I just love the way the Greek just lays things out, because for my mind it's just almost very not simple, but
Mhm.
even like, because we don't have a tense even to talk about something that continues to happen and will continue to happen forever in English. It's like we have to
Right.
word that through a sentence
Mhm.
to make it mean that. In
Right.
Greek, it's just like, well, I'm just going to say this word and it's going to mean it. And it's like, okay, and it really kind of breaks different things down for you. And the way things look different and even sound different. And that's kind of why even with the anxious word is I was looking at different translations and what different people, and some people will say don't worry about, and some people say don't be anxious. And
Mhm.
it's like anxious is really what's used majority of the time when this word was written. And even when you're looking at, you got to look at, well, how did Paul write? Or
Mhm.
how did these different authors write? Which if you're ever looking to translate, who's it? Is it Thessalonians? Who was it had really bad, or somebody in the New Testament that had really
Mhm.
bad grammar? And I always like translating that book
Oh, I don't.
because
I don't. I don't
I
know
have
about
to
that one
think
yet.
about, is it Jude? I think it's Jude. Don't quote me. I'm just kind of spitballing here. But
Yeah.
I mean, I just love looking at this stuff, and to me it's just interesting because it gives me kind of a glimpse into what the historical reader read,
Mhm.
and what the ancient
Right.
Hebrew would have understood. And even like into the New Testament is or the Old Testament. I mean, there's Septuagint is a Greek translation of the Old Testament.
Yeah.
I got that somewhere. I had
Oh,
it
that's cool.
earlier, but
Yeah.
it's like I love looking at that too.
Yeah, and I love how we both have our different approaches, but both of one is how the like you just said, yours is how the ancient Greek or Hebrew reader would have read the text, and mine is how they would have heard the text. Maybe and it is a text, but also what was the world that they were, what's the water
Mm,
they were swimming in, that sort of thing.
yeah.
That, there's so many things that we say that make sense to us that would not, even if you translate it appropriately, doesn't make sense. And here's just a little bit of preview. I didn't mean to mention this, but I was always very nervous to do a study on Revelation because it's a very cryptic book. It's, and I have known way too many instances, either people I know or public figures who have gone off full on and off the deep end and making all these claims about Revelation that's just, you know, either is not true or it's just a little wild. And I had in one of my classes, somebody had a fellow student said, today, if we were to say something like, if we did a political comic with an elephant and a donkey, we know exactly what that is. Some other people, if they're not familiar with American politics, they may not have that too. We have like an elephant and a donkey arm wrestling, and you have a old man in a top hat trying to judge between them. We know what's going on there,
Yeah.
but somebody else may not. And if this was 2,000 years ago, you go back to ancient, Greco-Roman world, they're going to be smart enough to know that, okay, we're not actually having elephant and donkeys, fighting, but they have no idea what we're talking about. And so
Yeah.
when somebody mentioned that, I'm like, oh, okay, that makes a lot more sense. And if you can start to try to understand their world a bit better, you can start to have a better understanding of what in the world's going on. And Revelation is still one that I just mentioned as a youth pastor. I always, about once a year, I'll ask for suggestions like, hey, do you guys have a book of the Bible you want us to cover? And we'll go through, if it's a shorter book, we'll read the entire thing. And if it's a longer book, we might have to summarize little bits here and there. And one of the girls at sixth grade, she came in and she said, let's do the book of Revelations. It's like, okay. It's like, just so you know, we went for Genesis chapter 1 and 2, we took 6 weeks to do that. So,
How,
and she
how
just
long
like,
did it take you?
yeah. So Revelation might be 6 or 8 weeks to go through that, but that's my plan is in this next school year to try to start working through that. But yeah, the Genesis one was fun too. But anyways, getting off track here a little bit. Um,
Revelation's a fun one. I piddle fart. There are a few things that I just try to do to keep. You want to keep your sword sharp, so I'll
sure.
stop and I'll try to translate and look through stuff and make sure I still can know how to translate this many years later. Revelation is one that I always think I'm going to translate through the book of Revelation, and I get like one or two chapters in, and then I shelf it, and so then I bring it back, and then I'm like, oh man, I'm only in chapter 2. No, I'm just going to go back and I'll just do like First John. I'll translate that one.
Yeah,
And it's a fun one because I mean, especially from the ancient reader, I know I'm just kind of going down a trail here for a sec, but it's like
sure.
there are so many like little things in the book of Revelation that it's like the ancient reader knows exactly what this is and knows what it's getting, what they're talking about here. And it's like, but how do you translate something that I wish I could just sit down with them and be like, well, okay, what's a good translation here? Because this word that so and so translated, such and such in
Hmm.
Matthew, you're trying to translate completely different here, but it's the same word. Why is that? And it's like so many different things that, at least for me, I try to just get in the head of that ancient reader and be like, well, okay, how would they look at this word and what would they say it means? And so,
Right. Yeah, and that's I think one, if anyone wants to try to look into Revelation, the one thing I would say is, yeah, it helps to understand the entire rest of the Bible. Definitely the Gospels and a lot of the old Hebrew stuff that we're working around, the temple worship, that sort of thing. And what will actually nicely segue into the other thing we're going to talk about is Babel as well. Babel, Babylon, and Jerusalem throughout the entire Bible is as a pitting of two cities. It's a tale of two cities. It's the best of times, the worst
yeah.
of times, right? Where you have Jerusalem and Babylon are like the two contending viewpoints throughout the entire scripture. And then you definitely see that in Revelation. So for anyone wanting to go into that, before you start, trying to guess if, you know, let's see, this year will be 2025. So 25 reasons Jesus is coming back in 2025. Before you try to do that, go read the Old Testament and see if that lines up.
I could
But
come up with 25 reasons, maybe. I don't know.
yep. So what I think I'm going to do, I'm going to have a little bit of mercy on somebody who has been very interested in this. We're going to go ahead and cut this into 2 episodes. So we're going to go ahead and end this one here, and then we're going to pick right back up in the next one. as soon as it gets aired. But if
Sounds
you
good.
stuck around this whole time, I really hope you have. Thank you very much. Go read Philippians chapter 4. Read the whole book of Philippians. That really helps. That's another great thing for context. But if you think we're wrong on something, if you this opened your eyes to some degree, if you think you can spell exegesis without autocorrect, actually that's a fun test. Don't use
I
autocorrect and
can't do
type
it.
in exegesis into the comments and let's see what happens. But also, if you have any other verses that would be really great to look into, do that. Again, like, subscribe, and all the other things that you already know what to do. And we'll see you in the next one. And because I have ADHD and I'm super awesome at remembering things, before we get off here, I want to go ahead and test me and Dustin's ability. Basically, I know, both done youth ministry, and that also means you have to be quick on your feet. So I'm going to go ahead and just throw it at Justin real quick. Can you give us like a 30 seconds to 1 minute devotional, whether it's to teens or not, or however you want to, whoever you want the audience is, let it be whoever it is. 30 seconds to 1 minute devotional for Philippians 4, the verses we covered, and go when you're ready.
I mean, okay, so start the devotional, right? Now I got to get into my youth pastor mode, right? You got me my mojo. But the focus here we tend to put is on the don't be anxious. And the one thing really we need to take away from this passage is the idea of when we feel anxious, we need to sit down and we just need to pray and give God those anxious thoughts. We need to give them God, not we don't need to pray and ask like take these thoughts away, but we need to thank God for the things that he's already given us and help us not to focus on those anxious thoughts. So does that work? Is that a
That's
30
great.
seconds?
Yeah, I'm
Yes.
about ready to go down the altar and get saved too. So
Go for it. The running joke that I've made a couple times, because youth ministry, right? You may have that one girl that's gotten saved like 9 times, and so you laugh
8 of it was
because
at youth camp.
yeah. And so I always tell my buddy, like every Caleb is the other guy on my podcast, he's preached a couple times and he's like, "How well did I do?" And I'm like, "Man, Caleb, I got saved 3 times in that message. You did a great job."
That's awesome. All right, so I'm going to try to go for it as well to the best of my ability. So in Philippians 4, it tells us to be anxious for nothing. Essentially, this is more of like a state of being thing. So if you find yourself always worried, always concerned about something, that's a great time to invite Jesus into this. I think about prayer sometimes like, as an invitation. We're inviting Jesus into our problems, but be honest about your problems. Don't just deny and think, well, I'm just not anxious about anything. I can never feel this way. You're a human and you're going to feel what you're going to feel. So invite Jesus into this and then give Jesus your anxieties, your worries, your cares. And then in place of that, he will help give you the things that are worth thinking about and keeping your mind presently on things that are lovely and true and commendable and beautiful and right and just, all of these things that God wants to be able to give you if you actually are willing to give over these things that you are worried about and give those to him. All right.
Perfect.
Nice.
I got saved twice during that. No,
Twice.
sorry.
Okay. If I ran a full minute, maybe we'll see what would happen. All right. So with that, this is the official conclusion of this particular episode. We will see you in the next one. Yeah, we'll see you in the next one.